Welcome back, everybody. So I'll pass it over to Lewis and Paul for the PISP update. Lewis?
Cool. Thanks, Simeon. Hi, everyone. Happy Thursday. My name's Lewis. I'm one of the developers working on the open source Mojaloop project. And I'm also joined by Powell, one of our excellent developers who I've been hiding from you for the last year or so. Powell, I don't know if you want to give a quick intro.
Hello, everyone. Greetings from Poland. I'm Paweł Marzec, and I'm the developer which is specialized in the Node.js.
Cool.
So.
All right. So yeah, a bit of a quicker update today on the PISP stuff. So just, yeah, a little bit of background. I'm going to skip over these slides. We've included them in every presentation so far. But kind of roughly speaking, a PISP is a third party or is a participant in a Mojaloop scheme who doesn't hold funds, but they can initiate payments on a user's behalf. And I think Adrian's already talked a little bit about them today. So there's plenty of other details out there that we can kind of go into detail. This is what one might look like, or the interactions between a user, a DFSP, and a PISP. And actually, I really wanted to come to this slide to say, actually, like with the fraud risk management workstream, it's been 1 year since the initial PISP proposal was brought up at a convening, which was last January. So we've been going for a year now on this type of work, and it's exciting to see everything that's happening. And sometimes it feels like things aren't moving fast enough, but also it's nice to look back and see, wow, we've actually come a long way. So yeah, this is kind of where we're at the moment. So for our update with PI12, I think last time we had some demos for you and we had a bit more kind of along the transaction flow to demonstrate. It's been a little bit quiet for the first half of the PI, as you can see from this GIF here that demonstrates a tumbleweed. But now things are kind of picking up and getting moving, and yeah, really kind of getting into gear. A lot of the focus for this PI and probably the next one as well is really about delivering an MVP for the PISP functionality. The stuff that we've been able to show you so far has been pieced together, little demos here and there, but there was a lot of missing steps. So here we're coming back, where we're implementing all of the error handling, the non-happy path cases, where we're solidifying a lot of the scheme adapter, the third-party scheme adapter, as well as SDK scheme adapter, which Powell is going to be sharing about as well. And then we've also been looking at how do we demonstrate the end-to-end account linking flow, both for an end user, but also in a simulated environment for doing things like end-to-end tests and regression testing and things of that nature. Another important thing, which is probably the biggest change, is the third-party API special interest group. We meet fortnightly on Wednesdays. There's details on Discourse if you'd like to join us, or if you'd like to know more. We also post the meeting notes there. Thanks to Michael, we have an API draft for the PISP API, which is really exciting. And we've been fielding questions about that and working and iterating on improvements for that. And currently in the special interest group, we've started working through the sequence diagrams for account linking. Just to kind of, sorry, I'm probably skipping over a few things. We break down the interactions with the PISP into 2 steps. One of them is account linking, which is a process where we set up a user logs into the PISP's app. They prove to a DFSP that they are that user, and then they exchange a FIDO credential. So maybe they'd use a fingerprint or a face scan or something like that to create a credential that lives on that device and doesn't leave. And then when a transaction, for the transfers flow, when a transaction comes through, they can sign that some aspect of that transfer with that credential they created on their device and prove to the DFSP, yes, this is me. I did authorize this transaction. So that's kind of the rough interactions that this API governs, and we're currently, actively talking about. So a few design updates from last time. We had this question about transaction callbacks, and we've gone around in circles a little bit. A transaction callback is the thing at the very end of a transaction to notify a PISP that the transfer or the transaction was successful. And we ended up circling back to the start and just saying, actually, the DFSP is the one who's responsible. The sending DFSP is the one who should be responsible for sending the status to the PISP. And one of those decisions related to that was really around, we don't want to store external state or unnecessary things in the switch. And the sending DFSP is the kind of the holder of the truth of the transfer, really, when it comes to looking at the way that a PISP and a DFSP interact. So Paul is going to take over from here, talking about a little bit more about some of our API stuff. So Paul?
Okay, so open API snippets. This is a concept. This is a practical improvement we proposed to how we are specifying the interfaces, the open API interfaces, because now they are big files. So we decide to simply chop them into a small snippets, so we can easily reuse them when we are redefining the open API specification for microservices. And we also introduced the auto-generated TypeScript interfaces from the YAML code. So we have only one source of truth over all our services, and we have a common type system. And it also introduced the improvement at the level of implementing our microservices. We have a compact template definition, and we reuse already defined code snippets in the microservice open API definition. And we also introduce a tooling for TypeScript interfaces generation. So in our microservices, we can generate automatically interfaces. So there is no risk to make typos or introduce the new fields without any warning. And there is also a very nice tool where you can browse our API snippets. If you can go, Luis, there.
Yeah. This one. So, yeah.
This is the interactive page. There are all at the schemas level. There are all types. They are cut on small pieces. I think the most obvious one is the money.
Yeah, I'll go down.
So then we go to this money,
yeah.
And there is also a corresponding and proper TypeScript money interface. So we believe this approach will lower the set of the problems. It will lower the level to get into this quite complex schemas, and it will simplify our development in future. Maybe we can go to the next slide, please.
Yep.
Okay, so Schema Adapter standard. We decided to keep the separation of the concern. We decided to have a two separate set of the APIs. APIs at the Mojaloop switch, which are dedicated to DFSPs, and set of the APIs which are dedicated to implement a third party or PISP API. And to integrate the PISP or DFSP with the Mojaloop, there is introduced the concept of the Schema Adapter. The Schema Adapters are special services which are allowing parties to interact with the Mojaloop switch in the programmatic way. So every of these Schema Adapter, they have two services. There is an ingoing service where the notification from the Mojaloop switch are incoming and outgoing interfaces or outgoing service, where DFSP or PISP can initiate the workflow. What is the workflow on the schema adapter? It is the set of the operation. For example, to make a transfer, we need to resolve the parties, get information about the parties, identify the sender and the receiver, and need to call a quote and then initiate, ask for the authorization and initiate the transfer itself. So it is set of the steps, and to implement the workflows we are using state machines. But during the POC, we discover a problem with the clashing endpoints. For example, at the get parties. With the Mojaloop asynchronous API, the get parties, Mojaloop is sending back to the schema adapter information about the parties. But if we are having two schema adapters, only one of them will receive the information about the party. So we introduce a client-server model between the SDK schema adapter, which is dedicated only to the DFSP, and it is a server for the third-party schema adapter. So we introduce the concept of the synchronous API. So we are exposing on schema adapter the synchronous get parties, for example, API. So the third-party schema adapter or another DFSP or PISP backend which expects synchronous API can use this endpoint to use this feature. Can we go to the next slide?
Yep.
So how we resolve the problem of exposing this synchronous APIs. For example, the get parties or post quotes. We have the Mojaloop. Let's assume that the PISP would like to start a workflow like request to pay from the right to left. We can take a look on this diagram from the right to left. So PISP starting the workflow on the outgoing interface. So the workflow code is using the synchronous get endpoint, which is exposed on SDK schema adapter, and SDK schema adapter use a PubSub pattern, observer pattern, using the Redis in-memory store. So it is quite fast and with the very low latency, and so when the response from the switch comes on the incoming interface via the PubSub channel, we can send down the information received from the switch. So when a third-party outgoing service is waiting on that response, when it receives it, it can start and continue the workflow and use the received information. Using this separation, we also because, for example, during making the transfer, there was a need to make a call to ask for the authorization, and for the DFSP flow, we are asking. There is different logic for the DFSP flow and PISP flow. So we decided not to pollute the SDK schema adapter with any PISP-related logic, and using this tandem help us to keep this separation of concern. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Powell. So a few outputs. I think the main one to kind of talk about is the API draft, ready for your perusal and comments. And as I said, in open discussion. So here's a link here to the GitHub issue we're using to track the conversation on this. And really, yeah, that's all we've got to show you guys today. We're all heads down, working hard on what we talked about, and maybe just to zoom out a little bit and look a little bit more at the roadmap. Right now, as I said, we're focusing on the non-happy path scenarios, both for linking and the transfer components. And Parwell's work with the schema adapters and that stuff has really been integral to figuring out how to not only get this stuff working for us, for our simulators, and to test this in an end-to-end example, but also to make it easy for DFSPs to support PISP functionality. And for PISPs as well. So working on end-to-end demos as well, updating, we have the Moja Pay app that some of our Google interns helped with and a few other guys helped with that we want to bring up to date as a reference application from the PISP side. Another thing on our list is to merge back upstream with Mojaloop so that when you deploy Mojaloop, there's a couple ways we could look at it, but you could essentially have a switch in Helm to say, turn on PISP mode, yes or no. And there's a few new services that would be deployed along with that, but also there's a few that we need to look at possibly merging upstream to Mojaloop, the existing kind of core Mojaloop stuff. Published version 1.0 of the third-party API. This is going to take a little bit of doing, but certainly we can get a draft that we're pretty happy with, and we're getting closer to that. And finally, documentation. And maybe if I say it 3 times, it will magically appear, or more likely, we got to kind of come and do that and make sure that we're really covering our bases. The team's done an excellent job at documenting as we go along a lot of this stuff, and I really commend Parwell and Kevin and Sridhar for their work there. But definitely there's going to be some work in doing onboarding guides for DFSPs and PISPs, and also we talked recently about a set of rules or principles and options that a switch can make when deploying this type of functionality, and recommendations as well that we have for ways to go about doing PISP. So yeah, that's all from us. I think it's pretty short today, so we could probably get you guys back a bit of time. But yeah, thank you for tuning in, and yeah, if there's any questions, happy to answer them here, or we can also follow up in the discourse as well.
Cool. You've got some time left, so I will open it up to the attendees. If anyone has a question, just raise your hand. I'll give you the
Cool.
option to voice your question. And then Lewis and Powell, perhaps you might want to scan. Yeah, Miller, go ahead. Yeah, I can't hear you, Miller.
I can hear something.
Can you?
Oh, I thought I did.
Just differently.
There we go.
There we go.
There we-
I can hear you.
Hang on. Oops.
We can hear you.
Mm-hmm.
There. Is that better?
Yep.
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry. This is great progress. You guys have obviously been beavering away in silence. Yeah, because there's a lot here. And this is great to see. I guess I had mentioned in the chat here that how long would it take to get the end-to-end Golden Path demo back up and running? You guys had an early version, as I recall, that was based on a Google smartphone app, I think.
Yeah.
How long will it take to get that basically back to Golden Path demo? Because I think there's some pent-up demand from some adopters to understand the space better. They're not committed yet. They don't really even understand it. But I think a concrete demo would take us a long way into explaining the values and benefits.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's on the roadmap for the end of the next PI. There's been a few changes to the API draft or some of the ways that we've been defining the APIs that we need to go back and revisit a bit of work. The other thing as well, that API, the demo that we had did a good, was implementing the transfers flow, but it wasn't implementing the full linking flow. That was always kind of against a testing toolkit, not against a live environment. So some of the other work that the guys have been working on around showing the out-of-loop authentication at the start using an OTP or a web, like a web, DFSP's web login page or something like that, is also kind of a prerequisite to having that demo going as well. Because we want to be able to show the full end-to-end experience from a user's perspective. But yeah, aiming for end of next PI, hopefully sooner if we can.
Okay, that's great. I guess one more question, then it looks like we've got some others coming in too.
Yeah.
Have you guys thought about if we look at the, and I'm sorry, Justice, I don't recall if it's called hybrid or it's that merged form where you have both sort of standalone and also embedded together. Is there a touch point for fraud and risk management here that allows the PISP to become a direct participant in the fraud system so that essentially during the setup of the PISP and that there can be a dip through the FRMS system for relevant things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. I hadn't thought of it. My only thinking of that was around the transaction time, at which point, to which I would say, don't worry about it. The sending DFSP would do that. But certainly for the account linking, yeah, you could. This
is exactly my point.
Yeah.
The account linking is a key piece of unknown for us now, especially as we don't have any visibility from the central hub system for onboarding of an end user, except as their alias is added to the ALS. And I don't think we've thought that much about what the data packet looks like for that and how the FRMS system could study it. And so I think maybe some iteration there would actually improve both parts, both direct DFSP onboarding and also PISP registrations. There may be other things too, such as a weird number of Knox handles that are being generated or other kinds of oddness that come out of the PISP world that wouldn't be seen in a DFSP world that could add value there. I don't really know. This is more a question about how you could interact with the FRMS workstream, but without taking your eyes off the ball on the stuff you have to do. Anyway, looks like there's other questions coming in.
Cool. Thanks, Miller.
Sam, do you want to go next?
Sure. Thank you, Simeon, Luis, and Paul. I won't apologize if you see this as a plug for TTK, but this is more of a plug for the demo work stream. So can you briefly touch on how you can use the TTK to show the PISP transfers so that it helps with the hackathons and demos, stuff like that?
Yeah. So in the DFS Lab bootcamp last week before last, we don't have the PISP functionality implemented as a part of the core Mojaloop sandbox that we deployed. But the great thing was that what we've been doing is using the testing toolkit to write tests against and automated tests against. We've been doing that for the last 6 months or so in the PISP work. So what we were actually able to do, there was a couple teams that were interested in PISP. We could point them to our existing documentation and our existing config files that we had with the testing toolkit and said, here's some documentation, go and run this yourself. And we wrote a little guide on how to conduct a transfer using the PISP APIs. So yeah, that was a great example of, I think it's 3 config files that we had, 3 or 4 config files, and then 1 little guide. And with that kind of config set up with the testing toolkit, we could effectively demonstrate the PISP transfer APIs and get people using them and playing around with them pretty easily and pretty quickly. So yeah, it was good to see.
Thanks, Luis. Yeah, I mean, the last time's demo was great. Even though we have not done like anything significant this PI, I think it would be nice to see the demo so that it helps the demo work stream and others, every PI, in fact. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly.
Awesome. I am going to end it there. Lewis and Paul, thank you so much. I see a number of questions to add. So if you want to jump on that or on discourse, just keep the conversation going. Thanks so much.
Yeah, can do.